I'm Dr. Dan from Vitamin Pro, and we've been doing a fair amount of analyses of these genetic reports that we get from a company called NutriHacker. And this is usually a 9-page report, and it comes from raw data that it gets from 23andMe. But you can search our website, ovitaminpro.com, to look for ways to go about that. But the point I want to make in this video isn't to talk about that specifically, but just to mention that when we look at these reports that are divided into sections, detox, neurotransmitter, or methylation, and cardiovascular, and a couple others, oftentimes to help with an enzyme pathway that's not working quite right is to add B12 to the diet, or to up the B12. So I thought we should do a basic talk about vitamin B12 so that we get some understanding of this. Now, first off, let's start with B12 and cobalamin. Those are the same thing. Those are used synonymously. So if you talk about methylcobalamin or methyl B12, that's exactly the same thing. So cobalamin is a large molecule, and it contains cobalt, and that's where the name cobalamin comes from. So the cobalamin is partially defined then by what's attached to it. So methyl group, methylcobalamin, or hydroxy group, hydroxocobalamin, adenosyl, or cyanocobalamin. So those are the 4 common types that you might run into. But let's start first off with cyanocobalamin. So there's a cyanide. There's cyanide attached to the cobalamin. Now that sounds kind of scary, but we're talking about very tiny quantities. But if you're a poor methylator, and maybe a poor detoxer, and you have some neurological type symptoms that are chronic, you certainly wouldn't want to be taking a lot of cyanocobalamin, because first your body has to pull that cyanide off and then detox it, so it adds to your detox load. So that's not going to be a good form for most people. Now, if you get a little bit of that in some other food or supplement, I wouldn't worry about it. But you certainly wouldn't want to take it as your primary B12 supplement. Now, the most common kind you're going to run into is methylcobalamin. And methylcobalamin is certainly fine for a lot of people. But if you have any neurological issues, you're going to want to probably skip over this one and jump to hydroxocobalamin or hydroxocobalamin, or otherwise known as hydroxy B12. Now, when you look at neurological pathways, there's a couple that really don't like the methylcobalamin. It actually interferes with their function, and these are important in producing things like serotonin and dopamine. So some pretty important neurotransmitters. So if you have some neurological issues, and you've got some problems with certain enzyme pathways in your brain, then your choice should probably be hydroxocobalamin. And not that many companies make it. We've got a couple that we sell on our website. One by Intensive Nutrition, and the other Source Naturals. I think we've got one. I'm not sure that's on our website though. And the other one's from Pharmax, and that's a liquid. So this hydroxocobalamin we've seen to be quite effective in some of these neurological issues and helping to calm that down. And we've also seen the opposite. When people have some chronic neurological problems and you give them a big dose of methylcobalamin, usually they're going to ask why you did that to them. So we've learned the hard way why we give people hydroxocobalamin instead of methylcobalamin, especially say if they have any kind of anxiety, depression, insomnia, or any other type of neurological problem. So the one I haven't mentioned very much is adenosyl cobalamin. Now that's not a very stable compound. It is found in the body, but it's not a very common supplement, so you can pretty much ignore that one. So in general, we want to do a simple blood test to find out what your B12 levels are. And we like to see them around 600 to 800. Now, oftentimes you see this as normal is maybe something like 200 to 600, but that's really not appropriate. In our opinion, it's possible to have some pretty severe neurological degeneration and be in that normal lab range. So don't try, if the lab comes back and says normal range and it's 300, that may not be nearly good enough for you. So again, we like to see those like closer to 6 or 800 in that neighborhood. And you know, B12 is not expensive, so it's not like this is going to be a $30 a day commitment or something. You know, this is, you know, these things are pretty cheap. So if you're on a vegetarian diet, you know, a lot of evidence shows that you're just not going to get the B12 except with supplementation. So, you know, but again, look at your blood test. Make sure that you know, especially if you have any neurological problems or you are on a vegetarian diet, make sure you're doing a blood test and keep those levels up. And you know, if you need to supplement with a little bit of B12, it's not a big deal. Now, some people don't have a protein called intrinsic factor. Intrinsic factor is a protein produced by your stomach that helps the B12 get through your intestines and in your bloodstream. And it's a little bit more complicated than that, but for some people, even though they're getting enough dietary B12, they're still showing B12 problems, anemias and whatnot. So again, be sure to look at those blood levels, and even if you're getting enough B12 in your diet or in supplementation, you may have to switch to an under-the-tongue supplement, you know, what gets absorbed directly into your bloodstream that way, or you can dissolve some liquid in water or under the tongue. So, you know, this is not hard stuff, but you just want to make sure that you're getting enough B12. So, again, I've kind of mentioned the hierarchy. If the neurological profile looks great and say no issues whatsoever, then perhaps methylcobalamin is certainly fine. And you know, but if there's any hint of any neurological issue, we always jump right to the hydroxocobalamin, because even if your body needs a little bit of that methyl B12, it can convert what it needs from the hydroxy form into the methyl form in your body anyway. So it's not like you're going to be missing out. I think that does it for now. That's a very simple overview of vitamin B12, and hopefully that will help you in your clinical decision making. So thanks a lot for listening. Hopefully that was helpful.